for the creation of the universe are self-caused cause, infinite cause, and uncaused cause. Starting with infinite cause, that is saying that the universe has always existed, that creation doesn't have a starting point, and just that the universe has always been. As far as we can understand, that doesn't make sense. And that's not to say that eternity doesn't exist, because it does when we die. But here on Earth, it just doesn't make sense. And a way to think about that is to imagine there are two objects that have been orbiting the Earth for all of eternity. But one of those objects are twice as far away from the Earth. So it takes twice as long. It has to travel twice the distance to orbit the Earth. So if I were to ask which of the two objects has traveled the most distance, there wouldn't really be an answer, because they've been doing it for all of infinity. So none of them could have traveled more distance than the other, because infinity is infinite. Another way to think about this is to imagine a hotel with an infinite amount of rooms, but it also has an infinite amount of people occupying those rooms. And then a van pulls up to this hotel with an infinite amount of people inside the van. Does the hotel have room for the van? And even though the hotel has an infinite amount of rooms, and infinity would make you think that there could never not be enough rooms. There's an infinite amount of people in that hotel, so there's not room for anybody else also. So that's another way that infinity doesn't make sense, and you can't really add infinity to infinity, or you can't take away infinity from infinity. So that is how logically infinity doesn't make sense here on Earth. Self-caused cause is saying that the universe created itself without like any sort of external thing creating it. This doesn't make sense because before the universe there was nothing, and it's kind of hard to truly understand nothing. A way that I think about this is to think about how people that were born blind, they don't see black. They just don't see anything. They don't see any color or anything. And that's still kind of hard for us to understand, but it helps because most of us would probably think of nothing as black. But nothing would mean truly nothing. And then from nothing, something happened. And by itself, that just isn't possible. So the only other option is uncaused cause. And this is saying that something else caused the universe to be created. When our universe was created, time, space, and matter were also created. And if something that existed before the universe created it, that something would have to exist outside of time, space, and matter. And something like that would be all-powerful. And God is all-powerful. So that's just a way that helps me think logically about how God exists. Another thing that helps, it's not necessarily proof, is Pascal's wager. That is saying that assume we lived in a world where God didn't exist. If you believed or didn't believe, it wouldn't matter when you died, because there just nothing would happen and you wouldn't lose or gain anything. But if we lived in a world where God did exist and you did believe, you would gain everything. You'd gain everlasting life, eternal happiness. But if you didn't believe, you would be in hell forever. You'd burn forever. And again, infinity is something that's kind of hard for us to understand, but it will make sense once you're there. So that's not really something that I'd want to bet against if you were kind of on the fence of whether or not you believed or not. One last thing that helps is the teleological argument. I'm going to be reading from my notes for this one. This is the argument for the existence of God from the evidence of order and hence design in nature. That's saying that there's so much evidence about how everything in the universe is so finely tuned so that this one planet, Earth, could sustain life. And some examples are the air we breathe contains 21% oxygen. If you were to bump that percentage up to 30% oxygen in our air, fires would start all the time. One of the things that a fire needs to start is oxygen. So if you were to have more oxygen in the air, a lot more things would be flammable, and it'll be a lot easier to start fires. If you were to lower the percentage of oxygen in our air to 10%, everybody would suffocate. So the amount of oxygen in our air is exactly where it needs to be to sustain life. Another thing, in our solar system, Earth is in a sort of safe zone. The next planet over, Mars, it's entirely too cold to survive on. And one planet over the other way, Mercury, it is entirely too hot to survive on. So Earth is right in the middle, again, where life can be sustained. Another thing is the sun is emitting radiation that would be strong enough to wipe out everything on the Earth, but it doesn't, because we have a magnetic field around the Earth that protects us from that radiation, and it also deflects that radiation away from the Earth. Also, there are gas giants in the solar system that help protect us, Jupiter and Saturn. They're so large that they're constantly pulling in space debris that would otherwise come to hit Earth. So those gas giants are protecting us, and if they didn't exist, Earth wouldn't either. There are many rules or laws in physics that are so finely tuned for life to exist. I can't remember the examples, but in the video we were showing there were like 12 examples, and they were all so finely tuned for Earth to sustain life. There is a theoretical physicist named Freeman Dyson who said that the more he studied the universe, the more evidence there is that the universe must have known that we were coming. So even this theoretical physicist is finding everything was set up so perfectly for Earth to exist that it couldn't have been a coincidence. There was one specific example. There's a universal gravitational constant that is really finely tuned all throughout the universe just for Earth. The way it's set is it only allows Earth to sustain life. I can't remember the entire formula for gravitational constant, but we were shown that it involved 1 divided by 10 to the 40, which is 10 followed by 40 zeros. And there was a really long explanation for how crazy of a number this is. If you change that number just a little bit, Earth couldn't exist. The explanation is if you filled up North America, like the entire area of North America, with dimes, and then you made a stack of dimes to the moon, and then you did this a billion times. Alright, so you've got all of North America full of dimes, plus a stack of dimes to the moon. And you've done that a billion times. And then you took one red dime, and you threw that somewhere in that sea of billions and billions of dimes. And you were supposed to pick that one red dime at random on the first try. You'd have lower than 1 in 10 to the 40 chance of picking that red dime on the first try. So you'd have a better chance of picking that dime than 10 to the 40, which, that's crazy. Like how you'd have 1 in a million chance, 1 in a billion chance. Your 1 in whatever chance would be smaller than 10 to the 40, so you'd have a better chance. That's how finely tuned that universal gravitational constant is. Another thing is if you took a tape measure and you put it at one end of the known universe and then put it at the other end of it, there would be I think it was 10 to the 28 inches, I think, and there would only be 1 inch on that tape ruler in 10 to the 28. That would be where Earth could be to sustain life. You'd have a better chance of randomly choosing that 1 inch first try than 10 to the 40. So that's just how specifically fine-tuned the gravitational constant is. So someone could argue that all of that is just a whole bunch of random coincidences all matching up perfectly for Earth, but I don't really see that as an option, because if you imagine someone is about to have a firing squad shoot at them, say 20 people, and they're 5 feet in front of the person that they're trying to shoot, and imagine all of those 20 people missed. That really wouldn't seem like a coincidence. The person that was supposed to die would think, like, that can't be a coincidence. That seems like it was set up. So that's what the teleological argument is, that everything is set up so perfectly for Earth to exist that it has to be set up. It can't just be coincidence. So all of those things are things that can help understand that God exists if you're struggling with believing that, because I used to struggle with that. I used to think that it didn't make sense for a God to exist. It just, to me, at the time, it made more sense to me that everything was random, that like the Big Bang happened from nothing, and that there just was stuff from nothing, but that doesn't make sense. So I hope if you're struggling, any of this helped, because even though I didn't know any of this stuff until after I got saved, it still just helped solidify